Okay, so that's going now. Today we're going to go through how to future-proof your content strategy and SEO for AI search in particular. So obviously a very changing market at the moment. Every day is different. My role at Varn is search and innovation director. Easy for me to say. Essentially looking at AI search and how it's evolving. Every day is different. Tomorrow will be different to today. Something else will be launched tomorrow that we didn't have today. So just trying to make sure that we're ahead for our clients. And we do lots of these training sessions and workshops in general. So if you need support, we're here to help. So what are we going to do today? We're going to go through an overview of AI search. We're probably all going to have very different understandings of AI search. Some people might be new to it, other people might be more technical, and maybe you're doing your own code and bits and pieces. I'll start with the basics and we'll go from there. Content, entities, knowledge graphs. How does AI actually understand your content and what can you do about it? How do you measure performance as well? So we have a AI visibility framework that we use to measure performance. I'll go through how that works at a fundamental level. And if we've got time at the end, we're going to go through agentic shopping as well. So something you might have heard being talked about, a very sort of new and emerging technology, just something you probably should be aware of, especially if you're in an e-commerce space. So first of all, how does AI search work? So like I said, they're going to go through the basics first. We're probably all aware of this. Traditional search tends to be more sort of shorter queries. You know, if I'm looking for a new cookware set, I might just search cookware set. I could search something longer than that, but you know, generally speaking, you tend to use traditional search in that kind of way. In AI search, people do tend to use it obviously in a more conversational manner. So what's the best non-stick cookware for an induction stove? I've got a family of 4. I don't, but just an example. You might see that over time, as traditional search evolves to being more AI influenced, that maybe the AI style of questions will come in and be more natural anyway. But at the moment, you've kind of got this split between how the way it's working. Obviously, traditional search brings in those 10 blue links that we're quite familiar with. AI search obviously brings in that one recommendation, that single generated answer. How does it do that? Well, AI search works in five steps, to put it in a basic way. So it's training, understanding a question, searching for an answer, putting everything together, and then actually delivering the answer, what you actually see in ChatGPT, for example. The training is step 1. So this is where the AI needs to understand how we actually talk and how we converse and how we write things online. So it spends a lot of time reading billions of sentences, billions of words. Ultimately, it's reading the internet to understand how we say things. So it learns frequency and like repetition and understanding how sentences are formed. So for example, the cat sat on the, it understands the next word is normally mat. So the cat sat on the mat, and it can kind of go, okay, the sentences are formed in this kind of manner, and that's what normally happens. So it actually becomes an expert at guessing what comes next. I think that's quite important. Step 2 is understanding your question. So when you ask an AI something, it has to try and understand what do you actually mean by that. It turns it into its own sort of diagnosis of what that actually breaks down into. So for example, how far is it to the beach? It's going to need to know, well, whereabouts are you? What beaches are you talking about? Is there even a beach nearby? What's the distance? How would you get there if it's far away? And what's the best ones? Like, what do the reviews say of the local beaches? Where would I actually want to recommend you? So it's got to kind of understand and get that information. Kind of leads into step 3, searching for that answer. Sometimes AI doesn't have the answer, first of all. It might need to go and search the internet for that information. So you've kind of got a separate part of an AI that goes out and retrieves that information. Step 4 is then putting it all together. So that's putting together whether it's a training data that's already got kind of coded in, alongside the information that's retrieved online. And we'll go in a bit more detail later on about how it actually gets the information from the online results. It discards what it doesn't think is relevant, and it puts things together into a final output, which is obviously writing the answer. It doesn't copy and paste the information every time. It writes a brand new response every time. So it's using its guessing skills from step 1 to put together the story, the answer that it wants to give you based on the information it's found. It's putting those words together into what normally people would say. And that's important because it can lead to hallucinations, probably all seen these. And this is really where AI is getting confused and is making things up. Because an AI is so good at guessing the next word, it might occasionally try and please you by saying, oh, this is what I think the answer is. Just be mindful of that. You know, for example, I've used it in the past to go, tell me what the annual turnover is of this business. It doesn't know, but it will give me a number anyway. So check that, is that number the AI pleasing you, or is it a real answer? So just double check. If that feels too easy, just check if that's actually backed up by factual evidence. And we'll go into how can you tell that as well later on. So in summary, they're learning from reading text. So if you don't say the words on your website, they're not going to know that you do those things. They prioritize authorities, so they're looking for credible brands. You know, anyone can say that they do what you do, but how can they trust that you actually are an expert in that? It obviously summarizes the information. It includes links to sources, and like I said, it can hallucinate and make up information if it doesn't know the answer. So how does AI understand content more generally? So when we look at content, I think it's important to not look at it at a page level, because while we can optimize single pages, it's more about how AI understands that topic as a whole. So your main topic, that one piece of content that we were talking about, it's obviously got subtopics, sub-ideas that AI needs to understand exactly what that thing is and when it might be relevant to return that information to a user who's asked a question about that particular thing. So an example of that is like a knowledge graph. So if you think of it as this way, the AI needs to understand your topic to go, okay, for example, a cow is an animal, it's a living thing, it eats herbs, which are a plant. Like, it needs to understand all that sort of context and evidence to understand what it is that it's actually referring to in the first place. And I'll get onto why I think that's important in a minute. Another example, you think about your brand. I've used this example because I found a very nice example online earlier. Albert Einstein, for example, we know lots of things about him. This is well documented. He's Nobel Prize winner. Various, theory of relativity, etc. That we know that these are things that he's was involved in. You need to think about the same for your brand, because the knowledge graph, this is the sort of tying things together, the entities tied together by those things that we know, and the AI needs to know about your brand or your business or the product you sell or whatever it is. So we need to think about entities, because that's what AI is going to relate to when it comes to trying to put together an answer for whatever that person has searched for. So an entity is anything that can be distinctly identified. It can be a person, a location, an organization, an event, a brand, a thing, an animal, anything that you can think of a thing. One of the challenges, though, when you're talking to an AI is that some things can be multiple things. So, for example, penguin could be the animal, or it could also be the book publisher. So how does it know when you're asking that question, what is it actually that you are specifically looking for? And there's kind of really two main categories for entities. One being the named things, so real world things. So Varn, for example, a business. Portugal, the country. Sabrina Carpenter, whatever, like people, things, companies, businesses, things. And you've also got concepts as well. So things like theories, emotions, social constructs, so excitement or peace. It needs to understand, what does that actually mean by that? So it's kind of tying all those things together to go and build its own knowledge graph, that when you ask a question, it needs to understand, I don't know, can you buy me tell me what the best pair of running shoes is? Well, it needs to understand what that is, how those things work, how they all tie together. And I think that's important because entities are therefore sort of backbone of AI search, but also the best solution depends on what AI search knows about your brand, your specialisms, your reputation, and that all comes from the recognition it knows from knowledge graph. So consider that your brand is an entity too. This is important because it determines when AI should use your brand and when it should not. So a little bit of a case study, a bit of an example is, what do you know about these two brands? I picked these two, don't have to fill the comment section or anything, but it's just to give a couple of examples of these two in the UK anyway, are quite well-known brands. Jet2, obviously quite famous for its adverts and the songs and everything at the moment. But what does AI think of these brands? Well, I asked a single prompt. I'll come to that later, why a single prompt isn't the way to go. But this is what AI gave me in terms of what do you think of the brand TUI and what do you think of the brand Jet2 Holidays? Now, it told me TUI combines broad affordability with robust digital booking options and a family focus. Okay. And then Jet2 stands out for value and family friendliness, operating with most UK airports and more than 75 destinations. If it were me, I think I prefer the Jet2 one personally. Like, I think if I were marketing for either of those companies, I think the way that Jet2 is represented is probably more favorable than TUI. You know, for example, it's pulled out things like TUI is broadly affordable. It's got a robust digital booking system. Not sure if that's that exciting for me as a customer. And a family focus. Whereas Jet2 is, it's valuable, family friendly, more than 75 destinations. There's a lot of positive. So I think when it comes to managing your own brand, it's looking at things like this. Do you agree with the perception? Do you agree with the sentiment? And if not, what can you do about it? And also, ultimately, this information comes from somewhere. So in this example, the TUI one that combines broad affordability and a robust digital booking system, that's quite a sort of a weird sort of wording, in my opinion. And sure enough, you can find that wording. This is from a review of TUI on an external website where it says those words, robust digital booking system. So remember that LLMs, AI search, they are regurgitating information a lot of the time. They're reading things online and going, oh, well, that must be the case. That must be true. So the words that we use on our websites, very important, but the words that are used on external websites also very important in terms of building that narrative, shaping that story about your brand. So I use that example of what do you think about TUI, what do you think about Jet2? Well, we actually see in traditional SEO that people often search X versus Y, or is X better than Y? You're going to get the same thing in AI search, of course. So try and make those searches as well for your own brands, businesses. What comes up? What are the pros and cons? And if you don't like the cons of your brand, well, where is that information coming from? Is it true? Do you need to change that narrative? Or if it's not true, then do you need to talk to somebody about changing an article or putting out a different perception or working with somebody externally to change that narrative? So yeah, it's important to get your own narrative right. And if you don't like it, then what can you do to change it? That leads on quite nicely to citations. So citations, in the world of AI search, a citation is like the receipt for the information it provided, same as you'd have in, you know, if you're doing your uni dissertation, you'd have to bring in the citations and the references of where you actually found the information from, your research, where did you get that information from? So you'd expect if the AI gives a statistic, it should be able to reference that and back it up with, I found that number here online, for example. And we can use that to our advantage as well as marketers to influence what we want it to say and what we don't want it to say. So this is an example. I went on ChatGPT, I think I was asking something like, well, I was just trying to find out more information about see when I could get building brands to come up, for example. What it came up with is, you know, not that exciting, but it showed me there's this citation here from Invest Plymouth. So there's a website called Invest Plymouth. It tells us that ChatGPT used the information on that website to build this response. So if we don't like the response it gave us, we probably have a check of that article. Is there some information there that's not right? Like, do they have the wrong phone number, the wrong address, or something like that we want to change? Or is it great? Is it fine? Yeah, the reason that's important, obviously, like I said, it's showing you where they found the information, but it also it's the evidence that AI is using to say someone else has recommended this, or someone else has said this, so I'm going to do the same. So it allows us to understand what we need to do as well. Like if we're looking at, and I always use the what's the best pair of white trainers or the best pair of running shoes. If you were a running brand and you weren't represented, you could use the citations to see where the AI was getting its information from and try and replicate that for your brand. So if you're not showing up, look what's cited and see how you can get involved in that same conversation. Do you need to speak to a journalist, speak to somebody about getting so that article recovered, or do you need to create some content that you don't have? So yeah, citation is a good way of sort of just sort of reverse engineering the AI search process. Okay. And then in terms of how AI is going to sort of rank things, it is obviously those citations that are one thing is most important. But the other part is also demonstrating your depth of knowledge. So what I mean by that is going back to the entities and demonstrating that you're an expert really comes back to putting topic clusters together. So if you think about your core service, your core product, your core offering, whatever, you're going to have that core landing page, that information page that explains what that thing is. There's going to be sub information as well, so sub pages. What kind of questions people ask, what are the common problems that people encounter, what do people ask before they make a purchase, and what other information do they need to know about it before they maybe go further. So that single page on its own isn't good enough to demonstrate that you're an expert. Don't assume that the AI can figure out what you do. You still need to tell it what you do and tell your users as well what you do. And you need to build out a sort of topic map, I suppose. An example of this is I did in Lisbon, so this is an example from that, and apologies that I'm not a graphic designer, so it's not a nice slide, but if you were a travel agent and you've got a holidays to Lisbon page, well, that's fine, but what else might the user want to know about? And maybe it's food and drink options nearby. What's the best hotels you recommend? What are the things to do in the area? If I was a Lisbon like tourist information website, I need to cover all of these topics to demonstrate that I'm a true expert in the city. So you need to kind of think of the same thing in terms of your business. Us in SEO and AI search, we've got a lot of subtopics to cover. We need to make sure we cover those on the website too, because otherwise, if you just cover the core topic, the AI only knows that you know about that core topic at that sort of basic level. So what else do you need to branch out to? So think about what else might a user ask, and do we have content for that? And if the answer is no, try and fill that gap, because otherwise you're going to not be cited when it comes up in somebody asking a question about that particular thing. And your competitor will. I think it's also important because of EAT. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's been in Google's algorithms for a very long time. In fact, might have been 10 plus years now. EAT stands for experience, expertise, authority, and trust. And it kind of goes back to being, well, if you're creating content, building a website, it needs to be quality, not just content for content's sake. So if you see people talking about churning out, for example, 1,000 articles a month because they're using it to make their copywriting, okay, does that follow EAT? Probably not. Like, is it demonstrating they're a true authority? Probably not. But think about what else matters here is things like, do you actively show your business address? Do you show your phone number? Are you easy to contact? Do you show who works at your business? Do you show who wrote that article? And are they an expert in that topic? Can you show that in the article? If you think about, if we wrote an article about whatever it might be, running shoes. I'm not a runner. I don't even know why I use running shoes as an example. I would never buy a pair of running shoes. But if I wrote an article about what's the best pair of running trainers, I'm not an expert, and the AI should be able to know that, because it'll see in my background, my own knowledge graph, that I'm not sort of a respected author in that topic. But if it were SEO or AI search, it should be able to put those things together. So think about how, when you're putting that content together, number one, that it's the most sort of thorough thing that it can be, but also how do you demonstrate that you're an expert, a true authority, or trustworthy? Do you have a case study or a testimonial to back it up with evidence, et cetera, et cetera. So demonstrate you're an authority, because anyone can put an article together saying X, Y, and Z things, but you need to back it up with trust as well. And then why does it matter for AI search? Because all this sort of content cluster stuff is really sort of building. It's what we've done in SEO for a long time, is building content gaps to try and figure out what kind of things people search for, and how can we better cater for that by having content available when it's needed. Well, it's the same in LLMs and in AI search. So AI search uses a process called query fan out. So you might not have heard of this, but again, have a look at it later on. It means when you make a search, well, let's start with traditional search. If you make a search in traditional search, it looks into its algorithm, its library of information, and it gives you a result of those 10 blue links. In AI search, if you ask a question, it needs to probably 9 times out of 10 research that question, understand, going back to entities, what is that thing you've asked me? What is that emotion tied to the thing you asked me? What information do I need to gather? And it does literally go and gather the information. And there are tools and ways you can find out what it is searching for when looking for those results as well. But as a real example, my next slide, again, taking a slide from my Lisbon workshop. If you were to ask what's the best cocktail bar in Lisbon, it's going to have to go and pull some information together to understand that. So what are the kind of things people might search for when it's looking for that? And this is real information taken from, I think, ChatGPT and how it looked at the subtopics it would look for. These are the kind of things it was searching for. And again, it's going to use Bing in ChatGPT's case to figure out these results, but it compiles all that information. So in other words, you need to be thinking about, well, going back a few slides to that, I'll go back a few to this part. Have you covered all these topics? Because the AI search is likely to go and gather that information and put it all together. And it comes back to then the query fan out part. It's not just answering that one question, it's actually answering, in this case, 6 questions and then compiling it all together. So you need a lot of content to kind of cover all those gaps. And then in terms of building out that content, so I'll go back to, if we're going to build a page about the best cocktail bars in Lisbon or the Lisbon nightlife best spots or whatever, how are we actually going to formulate that in terms of the actual page itself? So we talked about a topic cluster model. So building that pillar page, that might be your main service, your main product. That page needs to be really central to everything. It needs to be really detailed and explain everything about that main thing. But you also need to create those cluster pages that are going to be specific subtopics about that thing. The kind of often question people often ask and that kind of stuff. The pillar page, like I said, needs to be that central overview. Summarize each thing. You don't necessarily want to go into full detail because that might be what the cluster page does. How does it work? Well, you might have a full article about how does X thing work, or why does it work? Why is it more efficient? Why is it more cost effective, for example? So those cluster pages, they should go in depth on that particular thing. If I was a solar panel provider, might be like, what's the cost benefits of it? That's probably going to be a cluster page that's linked to from my topic page, the solar panels page, for example. And you will go in depth on why is it cost effective? Why is it good for the environment, and so on and so forth with that cluster page. And you want to obviously internally link from one to another as well. So if you're on I'll use that example again, the solar panels page, you'd want to link from the solar panels page to the cost page and vice versa. So make sure that they're sharing that relationship, building that knowledge graph, if you like, to say that these are related pages and they are relevant to one another. And also think about what else somebody might go and read afterwards. So what's the next thing they might read based on that? What else is relevant? So like I say, it builds that semantic relationship across your content, helps the AI understand the context and the connections between those topics. So it's not just about building a single blog post or something like that. It's actually building it into the structure of your site. Don't just dump it on the blog and hope for the best. You need to build it into the full structure. Okay, and that's just covering sort of what you need to do in terms of the kind of topics, but how would you actually make that work for AI search then? Because actually putting the content together on the page is another thing altogether. How do you want to structure it? How's the best way to format it, and so on? And how can you make sure an AI search crawler can actually read it in the first place? The first part, there's a few other technical parts to the way an AI crawler interprets content, but the most important one is making sure your content is available in kind of text form, pure raw HTML, if you like, if you want to talk about it in coding terms, but it needs to be available in text. So if you've got a website that's quite flashy and loads things in JavaScript or loads things in frames or iframes and things like that, it's probably quite likely that an AI can't open it. Also the case, of course, if you've got things in like password protected areas or in like gated content, if you're using anything where it's only available after someone's filled out a form, probably very likely the AI can't use that. But the most common one is JavaScript. So if you've got a website, just test it, find a page that you are interested in being in referenced in AI, find a JavaScript testing tool. There's lots of them out there, and just run to see what it looks like without JavaScript. So think about, sorry, I should have said already, a lot of LLMs can't process JavaScript at the moment. Probably they will be able to in the future, because at some point Google couldn't either. It can now. But what does it look like if you have JavaScript disabled? Because that's what the AI search is going to see. So in this example, JavaScript enabled, you can see the whole page with the filters and all the different blocks and everything. And a disabled, well, none of it, just got the heading. So just have a check of your content, make sure that it's being served properly with JavaScript disabled. And if it's not, then speak to your development team about what they can do, like I said, fallback non-JavaScript option. But then content is easier to do, obviously. So if you've passed that test of, okay, my content's being served properly, the crawler can see it with JavaScript disabled, what else can you do? So content structure, LLMs respond positively to well-structured content. That's why you probably see things like bullet points and numbered lists being used quite a lot, especially for key takeaways. Like if you've got an article, do consider that an AI search engine does only at the moment read, I think it's the first 6,000 characters of an article. So put the information at the top that's important. What's the key takeaways, and put that in a bullet point list, a numbered list, whatever it makes sense to do. Make it obviously be useful for your users as well. Like don't butcher an article just for AI search's benefit. Your user won't obviously like that if it's not sort of human. And make each paragraph stand alone. So don't rely on the AI reading the whole page with context. Like I say, at this moment, some of them can't actually read the whole page without moving on. So summarize where you can. Make sure each section is independently understandable, like each paragraph or each heading is sort of contained in that one area. And aim for one idea per section, really. So try to make it be that it's concise. That doesn't mean you need to dumb down your content. Like AI can understand, and search engine can understand what the words mean. You can use complex words, that's fine, especially if your readers are expecting that. But just make sure that it's sort of to the point, I suppose. Yeah. But again, think about your users too. Like, don't do that if it doesn't make sense. Use headings and content structures as well. So headings are a really great way of breaking down the content for AI. You can use heading tags like H2s and H3s to break it into sections. I'll give an example in a second of sort of how that might work. But that really then shows this is the start of a heading, and this is the topic I'm talking about. And then once the next heading comes in, AI knows, okay, I've moved on to another topic now, another subtopic. So it's like chapters in a book, like you're creating that clear sort of slice of when the next one stops and the next one starts. So an example from our data and analytics page on our Varn site, we have a H1 tag of data analytics and reporting, because that's what we do on that page. And then you've got the subtopics, the H2s, the main subtopics, and we've got H3s and even H4s, where it gets into the subtopics or subtopics. So you can go as far as you want with these H sort of tags, but obviously you're probably sort of stretching it a little bit once you get to 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, and so on. The H2s and H3s should really be part and parcel of your content. You know, break down those sections with H2s to break up. This is the next subtopic, and H3 when it's a subtopic of that subtopic as well. You can use keywording in here, but again, don't worry too much about keywording. It's more about what are the words your users are expecting to see, and what do I want people to understand about the topic in general. Do use keyword research to an extent to understand what content you need to be writing, but like I say, it's more about when your user lands on that page, is it going to be valuable in the first place? And then you're probably already meeting the content keyword requirements anyway. And then content clarity. So one of the biggest struggles I think we see with people in not performing an AI search is not saying the words in the way that people are searching them. So if you use names that make sense to you internally, or it's your internal product's name for that particular thing or service, does that make sense from an AI search and from a user point of view? Like, are you better calling it something more specific and to the point? Be specific about brands, people, tools. Don't assume anything. So kind of going back to that part earlier about talking about EDAT, and if you've written a blog post and that person that wrote that blog post is an expert, well, state it, say it. This person's been working in the industry for 20 years, say it, because otherwise the AI is not going to know that information, but it will do from that point onwards. And where possible, add things like dates, model versions, industries, add any context you can, don't be ambiguous. So for example, if you've got a predictions for 2026 page or something like that, don't say things like this year, because what is, next year that won't be relevant. What's AI going to know about that? They won't know when this was published. So in 2026, be to the point, say what you mean. And don't abbreviate too. Again, like if you're going to use abbreviations, fine if it's an industry term, like if that's really something that people search for and how they would search for something in an AI search, you can abbreviate, that's fine. But if you're abbreviating for your own benefit, like just make sure you're kind of using the words people would use themselves. So some examples of using real words where you can. So some examples of weak headings. I've got the this year one as that last example. So instead of this year, say in 2026, it gives that clear clarity of what you actually mean and when that was published as well. But other examples here, like ethical sourcing, great, sounds nice, sounds punchy. But to an AI search, it doesn't tell me anything about what you do. If this were a ethical clothes retailer, you might instead say where our clothes are made from and how we ensure fair wages. It's kind of saying the same thing, but it's in real words that an AI is going to understand that, oh, okay, you're a clothing business then. And instead of what we do, this is very common. You might have like a services page where it's what we do. Well, don't assume it's going to have to read the page to understand that. Can you simplify that? In our case, we do SEO and GEO services. It's to the point. It says the same thing, but it's much more clinical and it's not going to be confused in any way. And then what harms visibility? Probably harms is an overstep of this, but just what's not beneficial, I suppose, for visibility. Overloading your sentences. So kind of going back to the thing earlier about keeping headings, using headings to break down your content. Try to use that structure to your benefit. Don't overdo it. Don't have a whole wall of text, because that's going to be as difficult for an AI search to understand as it is for a human to kind of read that wall of text as well. Decorative symbols, just can't really process these properly. So don't think use things like stars and extra punctuation. It just, it's noise. It's not going to add any value to the AI crawler. Just try and avoid that generally. Obviously use them if it makes sense. And then unanchored claims. So kind of going back to the, say the real words thing. Don't use vague phrases like next gen, cutting edge, because what does it actually mean? How does it actually work? Why is it new? Why is it revolutionary? Tell me in real words why it's the next generation technology and why is it cutting edge? Tell me in real words. Okay. So kind of covered some basics in terms of how to look at performance from your own brands, like how are you being perceived online, where that information is coming from, the citations at a basic level. And we've now looked at what content you might want to create and how you might want to create that content. Again, all at a reasonably basic level, but the next step is then how would you measure performance? Because you can make that search one time of tell me what you think about Varn, tell me what you think about this business, etc., etc. But that isn't actually adequate enough, and it's also very manual as well. So what we need to measure is a few different things. So what we do at Varn is we measure a few different things to kind of get a benchmark and performance over time for how brands are doing. So first thing we do is we track things called mentions. It's kind of obvious. Is your brand mentioned in the result? So we'll track things like 50 or 100 different prompts, questions in things like ChatGPT and Gemini and so on to see what comes up. And we were expecting your brand to show up, obviously, and that's what we track in terms of a mention. They might not always link to you, though. But if they do, in the response, it'll be a citation like we went to earlier. So if it actually actively references your page content or your own page or whatever, then you've got a citation as well. You might have one, you might have both. You don't necessarily have both at the same time. But in some cases, a mention is probably more powerful, more strong than a citation, because a citation might be taken from, I don't know, like an aggregator of information on an external website. It might reference you, but you're mentioned as this is the leading brand, and I got that information from this external website. So mentions can be just as powerful, if not more powerful, than citations in terms of what the reader is taking in from that answer. How do we benchmark that data? Well, we can't look at the results of a single prompt, because every time you ask an AI something, it gives you a different answer. It's always making up its own answer based on its library of words and what it gathered on that single time. So we have to track a multiple prompts written in multiple ways, multiple times, in order to get an average of that data. How we do that is we do over 100 different questions, and we do at least 5 runs. That's the bare minimum. Like in reality, you probably do more like 50, but it's trying to gather as much data as possible. The more data you can gather, the more reliable your averages are going to be. We use the OpenAI, so ChatGPT and Gemini APIs to pull in that data. Means we can do it at scale. We're not literally pressing, enter every time you're asking a question and going and doing it manually. We're doing it at a more automated level. It means we get over 1,000 responses, and then based on that information, we can then go and understand what's the variations, what's the patterns, what's consistent, who's the most dominant brand, where are we underrepresented, where are we overrepresented, where are we seeing bad sentiment or good sentiment, and what do we need to improve and change. So it gives us a lot of data to go on, and a starting point for what our strategies might be. Cool. So what we need to measure is, let's say, that brand mentions, but also citations. But also things like how often are we shown in the first position, or what's our share of voice, essentially, for like that particular prompt or that particular topic, actually. So we measure things called presence, probability, and prominence, which I'll go through shortly to show you how we do that. So presence, these are the 2 I said earlier. These are probably the most important ones. So they are brand mention rates and the citation rate. So this is for the brand mention rate. It's how often is your brand mentioned in the responses as a percentage. If it's 100%, perfect. If it's not, then we might do some digging. And citation rate, same thing, but for links. So is your content referenced in the response? And again, what's the percentage chance of that happening, or the percentage frequency of that happening, rather? Probability. This is the chance of your brand being mentioned or cited across the whole set of runs that we've done. So kind of a combination of those 2 metrics to go, on average, you're 43% of the time you're being mentioned in that particular topic. And then prominence, what's the chance of you being mentioned as a first position? So if you're the first linked article, that's obviously also quite important to know. Like, it means you're not just visible, but you're also dominant in that area too. And then also we calculate a share of your AI voice as well. So what's your performance in comparison to your competitors, basically? So if you've got 43% and they've got 62%, well, that's actually, the math doesn't work there, but that's kind of showing you where the share of voice is maybe better in a certain topic versus others, and you can see where you're performing versus your competitors. What we're able to do with that is then pull in data like this. It's obviously just a made up table here, but we can filter it by ChatGPT or by Gemini or by Claude or whatever you want to measure, really. And we can also measure it by topics. So it's not just for all the prompts. We can split those prompts obviously into topics or sub-services or sectors or whatever it is that you do. You can split it down and break it down so that for product A, you're performing well, and for product B, you're performing poorly, for example, and we can see that information and understand it. This is the data we get at the top level. But obviously underneath it, we've got all of the information, like what were the most commonly cited pages, what were the most common themes about your brand, is the sentiment positive or negative, are people saying good or bad things about you? And we also have the same information about your competitors as well. So we can kind of use that all to not just go, okay, we're doing well, but what gaps do we have and what do you need to do about it going forwards? So yeah, it can be a great way of identifying topic gaps where you need to improve. It could be different based on LLMs. We've certainly seen for some brands where they're actually just not visible on ChatGPT because of the way that ChatGPT gathers data is different to how Gemini captures data. So it could be there's an issue there, and is that a particular thing you need to change? And it will change obviously over time as well. You know, as you do things and as your competitors do things, that measurement will change over time. And hopefully, if you've made some impact, you can measure that and show, you know, actually we were at 20% visibility, we're now at 60% visibility. You can benchmark it and rerun that data. So it's not just about measuring, it's about obviously creating strategic plans, understanding where you make the biggest impact. And obviously that's where what we do on a day-to-day basis. Before I move on to the next part, just spend a couple of minutes on this slide. So we've also got a downloadable guide of everything we've gone through today in a single PDF, probably a bit more actually as well. But feel free to scan this QR code. You'll get a form to fill out. It'll give you then the link through to the downloadable asset. Yeah, hopefully some good information we should take away. And I've got a few more slides after this one on agentic shopping. So if you're an e-commerce brand in particular, definitely something to stay around for. I'm going to use it as an excuse to have a drink. And any questions, anybody at this point, feel free to use the chat. Okay. So last section is on agentic shopping, and this is, in my opinion, quite exciting. So agentic shopping, I don't know if this video will work, but we'll try. What this is if you're on ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever, and you ask, find me a waterproof running jacket that's highly rated and under £70, whatever you want, really, you know, anything, that cookware set that I mentioned earlier, or running shoes, whatever. AI will be able to find that product and also buy it for you. So it's going to research the best product. We're already familiar with that. And it's going to come back and say, well, I think it's this jacket that you need. But it'll also be able to tell you now, and well, actually, I found it's available at this retailer and it's on offer now and it's in stock, and they say it's going to be with you on Thursday. Do you want me to buy it for you? That is something that is coming and is in the works. Let me just try and play this. Hopefully this will work. So what it will show you is things like it's on offer, it's the lowest price I've seen in 30 days, or I've just seen it's come back in stock, this kind of thing as well. So you've got like a live basket. This is obviously the Google view. I'll just play that again in case you sort of missed it. But this is the Google view. But ChatGPT has the same thing. And you know, if you're not ready for it, it's going to be something that's going to be, well, your competitors will be there and you won't be, kind of thing. Like it's going to literally go, I found this product, and away you go. As a customer, you're going to go there. Yeah, it's going to be on all of the AIs. It's already supported by Gemini and ChatGPT in the US only at the moment. It's due to be released, I think I read it was September or maybe November, one of those months. So sort of Q3, Q4 in the UK. We'll wait and see if that actually comes to be true. It's in testing at the moment. But you can get ready for it already. Like it's some technology that we know about and how we already know how it works because it's in testing in the US. There's no reason we can't get ready for it. But the key here is that users can purchase within the AI platform itself. So if you've ever bought anything on TikTok Shop, something like that, it's similar to that. It's not the same at all. Like it isn't the same, be clear on that, but it's the same sort of feel. Like you don't actually leave the app, you're staying there the whole time. So you don't actually need to go to the checkout at all. I think in the short term, likely be more valuable for things that are more basic purchases. You know, maybe your loo roll, your kitchen roll. It's very straightforward. Yeah, I can get it for you and be with you tomorrow. Great, lovely. I mean, probably just go on Amazon, but you know, it's perfectly doable to do that because the risk is lower. But in the long term, once it gets more trusted, it could be something that's much more widely adopted, really. And we've seen that in terms of some statistics. So UK shoppers, this is based on a survey that Adyen did in January. I think this is crazy, but okay, 44% of UK shoppers are open to AI handling their entire shopping process. I think that's mad, but okay, like trust is there, clearly. I think it depends on the thing you're going to buy. Like certainly if you're spending thousands of pounds, probably not going to trust AI to do that yet, but maybe in a few years, who knows, once it's sort of trusted and developed. And then the other stat was from internet retailing in February. So 50% of under 45s already use AI for product research and price comparison daily. So is the appetite for it is about, I think, building the trust probably first of all. So I've put that in the second on the right-hand side here. Probably going to take time for people to go, oh, okay, it does work, and it did work, and it did deliver me the things as expected. You know, once people go through that a few times, I think the bottom bullet points. At one point, putting your credit card details in was scary online, and now it's just normal, something you do all the time. You don't think about it. So it might be the same in the long term once it's sort of proven technology that it be something that people adopt more often. And it's also likely to use trusted, verified sellers. Again, anyone can sell anything online, but why should AI recommend you? It's going to need to know that you're a reputable brand with, you know, good review scores and so on, and availability and that kind of stuff. We've started to put this technology in place and test it for our clients, making sure they're ready for it. Because like I say, it's going to be all of those things that once it rolls out, if your competitor's there and you're not, you're going to be just behind from day one. And if people start to go, oh, well, I always use X brand instead of Y brand because that's what AI worked. It worked for me with AI last time, then you'll be missing out. If you're interested in that, we've also got a downloadable asset for the agentic shopping audit, how it works, that kind of thing, on a different QR code here. So if you're interested, have a look at that. Again, you'll get slides later as well if you need them. And then lastly, just yeah, thank you for joining. Really, if you want to connect to me on LinkedIn or ask any questions, you've got the chat box here if you want to ask anything immediately. But if not, ask me on LinkedIn, send me a DM, send me an email. Happy to help in any way, answer any questions. But yeah, thanks for joining, and hope you enjoyed it. And then just the last one, I just say that the recording will go over later today. Hopefully, I'm going to send it over to Building Brands and they'll forward it on to you. You'll also get the slides as well later on too. So if you've missed anything, don't stress. You'll get it all later on as well. Cool. If no other questions of anybody, then yeah, I hope you have a great day. Maybe keep in touch and speak to somebody later on. Bye.